From the Earth to the Moon. Chapter 14. Pickaxe and Trowel. That same evening Barbicane and his companions returned to Tampa Town, and Murchison, the engineer, embarked on board the Tampico for New Orleans. He was to engage an army of workmen to bring back the greater part of the working stock. The members of the gun club remained at Tampa Town in order to set on foot the preliminary work with the assistance of the inhabitants of the country. 8 days after its departure, the Tampico returned to the Espiritu Santo Bay with a fleet of steamboats. Murchison had succeeded in getting together 500 workmen. In the evil days of slavery he would have lost his time and trouble. But since America, the land of liberty, has only contained free men, they flock wherever they can get good pay. Now money was not wanting to the gun club. It offered a high rate of wages with considerable and proportionate perquisites. The workmen enlisted for Florida could, once the work finished, depend upon a capital placed in his name in the Bank of Baltimore. Murchison had therefore only to pick and choose about the intelligence and skill of his workmen. He enrolled in his working legion the pick of mechanics, stokers, iron founders, lime burners, miners, brickmakers, and artisans of every sort, white or many of them brought their families
with them.
It was quite an emigration.
On the 31st of October,
at 10 a.m.,
this troop landed on the quays of Tampa Town.
The movement and activity which reigned in the little town, that had thus doubled its population in a single day, may be imagined. In fact, Tampa Town was enormously benefited by this enterprise of the gun, not by the number of workmen who were immediately drafted to Stony Hill, but by the influx of curious idlers who converged by degrees from all points of the globe towards the Floridian peninsula. During the first few days they were occupied in unloading the flotilla of the tools, machines, provisions, and a large number of plate iron houses made in pieces separately pieced and numbered. At the same time, Barbicane laid the first sleepers of a railway 15 miles long that was destined to unite Stony Hill and Tampa Town. It is known how American railways are constructed, with capricious bends,
bold slopes,
steep hills, and deep valleys, and are not much in their way.
Only the trains run off or jump off as
they please. The railway from Tampa Town to Stony Hill was but a trifle, and wanted neither much time nor much money for its construction. Barbicane was the soul of this army of workmen who had come at his call. He animated them, communicated to them his ardor, enthusiasm, and
conviction. He was everywhere at once,
as if endowed with the gift of ubiquity, and always followed by J.T. Maston. His blue bottle fly, his practical mind invented 1,000 things. With him there were no obstacles, difficulties, or embarrassment. He was as good a miner, mason, and mechanic as he was an artilleryman, having an answer to every question, and a solution to every problem. He corresponded actively with the gun club and the Gold Spring manufactory, and day and night there. Tampico kept her steam up awaiting his orders in Hillsborough Harbor. Barbicane, on the 1st of November, left Tampa Town with a detachment of workmen, and the very next day a small town of workmen's houses rose round Stony Hill. They surrounded it with palisades, and from its movement and ardor it might soon have been taken for one of the great cities of the Union. Life was regulated at once and work began in perfect order. Careful boring had established the nature of the ground, and digging was begun on November 4th. That day Barbicane called his foremen together, and said to them, "You all know, my friends, why I have called you together in this part of Florida. We want to cast a cannon 9 feet in diameter, 6 feet thick, and with a stone revetment 19.5 feet thick. We
therefore want a well 60 feet wide and 900 feet deep.
This large work must be terminated in 9 months. You have, therefore, 400 cubic, that is to say, 10,000 cubic feet a. That would offer no difficulty if you had plenty of elbow room.
But,
as you will only have a limited space, it will be more trouble. Nevertheless, as the work must be done, it will be done. And I depend upon your courage as much as upon your skill. At 8 a.m., the first spadeful was dug out of the Floridian soil. And from that moment this useful tool did not stop idle a moment in the hands of the miner. The gangs relieved each other every 3 hours. Besides, although the work was colossal, it did not exceed the limit of human capability. Far from that. How many works of much greater difficulty, and in which the elements had to be more directly contended against,
had been brought to a successful termination.
Suffice it to mention the well of Father Joseph, made near Cairo by the Sultan Saladin, at an epoch when machines had not yet appeared to increase the strength, and which goes down to the level of the Nile itself at a depth of 300 feet, and that other well dug at Koblenz by the Margrave Jean of Baden, 600 feet deep. All that was needed was a triple depth and a double width. There was not one foreman or workman who doubted about the success of their operation. An important decision taken by Murchison and approved of by Barbicane accelerated the work. An article in the contract decided that their Columbiad should be hooped with wrought iron, a useless precaution, for the cannon could evidently do without hoops. This clause was therefore given up, hence a great economy of time, for they could then employ their new system of boring now used for digging wells, by which the masonry is done at the same time as the boring. Thanks to this very simple operation, they were not obliged to prop up the ground. The wall kept it up and went down by its own weight. This maneuver was only to begin when the spade should have reached their solid part of the ground. On the 4th of November 50 workmen began to dig in the very center of the enclosure surrounded by palisades. That is to say, the top of Stony Hill, a circular hole 60 feet wide. The spade first turned up a sort of black soil 6 inches deep, which it soon carried away. To this soil succeeded 2 feet of fine sand, which was carefully taken out, as it was to be used for the casting. After this sand white clay appeared, similar to English chalk, and which was 4 feet thick. Then the pickaxes rang upon the hard layer, a species of rock formed by very dry petrified shells. At that point the hole was 6.5 feet deep, and the masonry was begun. At the bottom of that excavation they made an oak wheel, a sort of circle strongly bolted and of enormous strength. In its center a hole was pierced the size of the exterior diameter of the Columbiad. It was upon this wheel that the foundations of the masonry were placed, the hydraulic cement of which joined the stones solidly together. After the workmen had bricked up the space from the circumference to the center, they found themselves enclosed in a well 21 feet wide. When this work was ended, the miners began again with spade and pickaxe, and set upon the rock under the wheel itself, taking care to support it on extremely strong trestles. Every time the hole was 2 feet deeper, they took away the trestles. The wheel gradually sank, taking with it its circle of masonry, at the upper layer of which the masons worked incessantly, taking care to make vent holes for the escape of gas during the operation of casting. This kind of work required great skill and constant attention on their part of the workmen. More than one digging under the wheel was dangerous, and some were even mortally wounded by the splinters of stone. But their energy did not slacken for a moment by day nor night. By day, when the sun's rays sent the thermometer up to 99 deg on the calcined plains. By night, under the white waves of electric light, the noise of the pickaxe on the rock, the blasting and the machines, together with the wreaths of smoke scattered through the air, traced a circle of terror round Stony Hill,
which the herds of buffaloes and the
detachments of Seminoles never dared to pass.
In the meantime the work regularly advanced.
Steam cranes speeded there, carrying away of the rubbish. Of unexpected obstacles there were none. All the difficulties had been foreseen and guarded against. When the first month had gone by, the well had attained the depth assigned for the time, i.e., in December. This depth was doubled and tripled in January. During February the workmen had to contend against a sheet of water which sprang from the ground. They were obliged to employ powerful pumps and apparatus of compressed air to
drain it off,
so as to close up the orifice from which it issued. Just as leaks are caulked on board ship, at last they got the better of these unwelcome springs. Wheel partially gave way, and there was a landslip of this bricked circle, more than 400 feet high, may be imagined. This accident cost the life of several workmen. 3 weeks had to be taken up in propping the stone revetment and making the wheel solid again. But, thanks to the skill of the engineer and the power of the machines, it was all set right, and the boring continued. No fresh incident henceforth stopped the progress of the work, and on the 10th of June, 20 days before the expiration of the delay fixed by Barbicane, quite brick round, had reached the depth of.
At the bottom the masonry rested upon a massive block
30 feet thick,
whilst at the top it was on a level with the soil.
President Barbicane and the members of the Gun Club warmly congratulated
the engineer Murchison.
His cyclopean work had been accomplished with extraordinary rapidity.
During these 8 months, Barbicane did not leave Stony Hill for a
minute. Whilst he narrowly watched over the boring operations, he took every precaution to ensure the health and well-being of his workmen, and he was fortunate enough to avoid the epidemics common to large agglomerations of men, and so disastrous in those regions of the globe exposed to tropical influence. It is true that several workmen paid with their lives for the carelessness engendered by these dangerous occupations, but such deplorable misfortunes cannot be avoided, and these are details that Americans pay very little attention to. They are more occupied with humanity in general than with individuals in particular. However, Barbicane professed the contrary principles, and applied them upon every. Thanks to his care, to his intelligence and respectful intervention in difficult cases,
to his prodigious and humane wisdom,
the average of catastrophes did not exceed that of cities on the other side of the Atlantic,
where they count
about 1 accident upon every 200,000 francs of work.